Well, it's now 11 o'clock and good morning. My name is Joseph Okello, and I'm the chairman and the co-founder of the Association of Family Business Enterprises. And shortly we will be beginning this very interesting webinar on shareholder agreements and other governance tools for family businesses. So a warm welcome to all of you who are in attendance. The format we will take is that we have two very competent speakers who will be taking us through the topics of shareholder agreements. And we will also talk about a few other governance tools that are required or are necessary for successful family businesses. And in the last 15 or so minutes, we're going to welcome and entertain questions and have a little dialogue, whereafter we will wrap up. So in a few minutes, we're going to begin. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to our webinar on shareholder agreements and other governance tools for family businesses. My name is Joseph Okello and I'm glad to be your host today. I am the chairman of the Association of Family Business Enterprises. And we will be talking about shareholder agreements, and we'll talk about other family and other governance tools. We'll touch a little bit on family constitutions and other things, but we'll let the experts tell us about it. The Association of Family Business Enterprises was started over 5 years ago, and our primary purpose is to work closely with family businesses, to assist family businesses to grow and prosper, and where possible to succeed to beyond the generation of the founder. We have come to the realization that many family businesses around the globe have similar challenges. We have to grapple with succession planning, governance, conflict, and many other things. And we thought by bringing family businesses together and other related stakeholders, we could work together to improve or to enhance family businesses, because we know what their importance is in societies around the world. In a country like Kenya, in our country, Kenya, we know that family businesses make up over 60 to 65% of the GDP and make an even larger proportion of the labor force in the economy. So they're vital to this economy and to many others. And in a time like this, as we're going through the COVID-19 pandemic, it's time for a lot of businesses to reassess how they operate and to reevaluate and to innovate, so that once we get through this, or if this is what is going to be the new normal, we find ways in which we can thrive and revive our businesses. But today's topic is about shareholder agreements, which is a very, very important thing. Many of us have companies that we have started, and very rarely do we ever consider having a shareholders agreement. In fact, some of us don't even know what it is, yet we are shareholders of our company. What is a shareholders agreement? Is it mandatory? And if it isn't, and if it's important, how come we don't have them? And do shareholders agreements protect the majority or the minority shareholders? Are they then enforceable in law? All these are questions that we're hoping to get answered as we listen to two very competent lawyers and experts and knowledge persons on this topic of shareholders agreement. I will introduce the two speakers, and after that, Atik Anjarwala, who is the first speaker, will take over, and then hand over to Mona K. Doshi. I'll start off by introducing Atik. Atik is a senior partner with ALN Kenya, Anjarwala and Kana. He has over 33 years of practice and experience and focuses principally on mergers and acquisitions, private client matters for high net worth clients, banking, general corporate advisory, and hospitality projects. He's very familiar with the African markets and is presently in the UAE, assisting clients making investments in Africa. So he's a very Africa-centric lawyer and has done a lot of work in the region. He's a solicitor of the senior courts of England and Wales and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. He's also a senior partner with Anjarwala & Khanna Advocates, Kenya's leading corporate law firm and the managing partner of AC&H. Atik is a recognized speaker and has conducted a number of seminars on various aspects of commercial law, banking, capital markets, and infrastructure projects and project finance. In fact, if I was to go through Atik's CV, then this whole webinar would just be based on his accomplishments. So Atik, I might not do justice to your introduction, but you'll bear with us. I think we get the gist. We've got somebody who knows what he's talking about. The second speaker is equally as accomplished, and that's Mona K. Doshi. She's also a partner with ALN Kenya, Anjarwala & Khanna. She co-heads the firm's private client law practice and also the real estate and construction department. Mona looks after the affairs of high net worth clients, including planning and managing various aspects of their finance. The practice includes advising on succession planning, which is very critical, drafting of wills, handling probate matters, advising on onshore and offshore trusts, drafting shareholders agreements for family businesses, advising on prenuptial agreements, drafting settlement agreements, advising on real estate and tax matters. She handles both local and multi-jurisdictional matters for private clients, and she acts for several charitable institutions and has assisted in setting up charitable trusts and foundations, and is listed as a notable practitioner in the Chambers and Partners 2019 HNW guide that ranks lawyers with experience in handling private wealth matters for high net worth clients. She's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, qualified with LLB honors from University of Reading, and completed the LPC at College of Law, Guildford, England. Mona is based at the firm's Mombasa office. So welcome Atik and Mona. On a personal level, I happen to know Anjarwala & Khanna. I used to work for a multinational based in Mombasa called Cargill, and we did some work, so I can vouch for the competence of this law firm. But in this capacity, they're here as members of AFBE and as persons who are going to take us through shareholders agreement, which we're looking forward to listening to. So I'm going to ask Atik maybe to start us off, and thereafter, when you're done with your presentation, we'll have Mona come, and then we will then go into a question and answer. So Atik, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Antoinette, for organizing this event. We're most grateful for the invitation. This is my first webinar, and I'm a bit of a mzee, so I apologize if, you know, I'm normally used to sort of face-to-face stuff, right? But I guess we all have to get used to this new format of working and doing business. But, you know, I've been looking after large high net worth families now, I guess, for about 15 to 20 years. And as I've grown older, a lot of the owners of businesses have been talking to me about what they should do with their businesses in the long term. And I think I just want to set some background, because I think what is important is to get a good feel of why this is important. And for me, when you look at, you know, and I've done some sort of research globally, you'll find that most family businesses rarely survive one generation. Sometimes they'll survive two, but very, very few survive more than two. And it's interesting that Joseph reminded me where he used to be with Cargill. And that's a fantastic example of a family business that has survived, I think, for about 4 generations. And they survived that, I think, because they had structures in place, okay? And the founders were motivated to ensure that the company survived them, okay? And so what drives me really is when I sit with clients is to understand what their long-term aspirations are. And for me, what is really critical is that we try and preserve capital. And I think that's a very big point for me, because, you know, if a family business does not survive one generation or 1.5 generations, what has happened is that you've destroyed capital. All the value that you built up in your businesses has been lost. And, you know, if you look at the first slide, really, I mean, we're just setting the theme there. And basically what we're saying is what is family governance? So it's really referring to structures and processes that would guide the family. Okay, Mona, could you turn to the next slide, please? Okay. So I really want to spend some time, but I think what I guess most of you as members are more interested in the practical aspects and not on legal technical issues. But for me, a fundamental theme is really understanding where your family business is, what I call, what is your family social contract? Yeah. And I think that's something that you need to think about as family owners very, very carefully. What do I mean by that? Okay, so you started a family business. Maybe it's a husband and wife situation. Maybe it's a couple of brothers and sisters together who decided to start a business. It could be friends. 3 or 4 friends together. If you don't sit down and actually work out what is your long-term aspiration, what do I mean by that? Okay, is your desire to build a business and to flip it in 5 years? Is your desire to build a business that's going to survive for the benefit of your children? Is it a business that you want to IPO? The point being is that if you don't sit down and decide what is your family or your business social contract, what are your long-term aspirations, there's a very high chance that you will in due course quarrel. Because one shareholder might say, well, we've worked really hard for 7, 8 years. We made good value, let's sell. Another shareholder says, no, I want this business to be for my children. I want them to generate revenue and have income from this business, and I want my children to join the business. So you could see immediately that not having a sort of values and mission and core value statement is going to be a problem for a family business. What we also find with families, especially where you have the sort of typical, say an elder brother or a father who started, then the sons join, is that this is a difficult conversation, right? Because if you have your 60 or 70-year-old dad who started the business, you've joined in, because of, particularly in our part of the world, because of cultural tensions, it's very hard sometimes to approach your father and say, or your elder brother, to say, well, what's the long-term plan? Okay, what are we going to do with this business? Because, we time and time again, and very sadly, we have seen this critical issue being put under the carpet, resulting in tension as you go forward. Because the aspirations of a young entrepreneur will be very different from the aspirations of an old entrepreneur. Okay? The young entrepreneur wants to invest, wants to borrow, take risk. The older entrepreneur probably wants to cash out. Okay? And therein lies quite a powerful tension, which I hope you will all appreciate. Okay? Family business leaders, another very, very a very hot topic that we are finding. Is it the case, and Mona is going to touch on this in some later slides, but is it the case automatically that the founder should be the business leader? I've got a number of cases which I'm handling for clients where, you send your son or daughter to Harvard or a top university in the UK. They come back having worked for 4 or 5 or 6 years in an international city, brimming with very important ideas on how to develop the business, okay? And then you expect them to work in the back office somewhere, and you don't take their opinion, right? Now, you can see what's going to happen there, right? I mean, basically, you're going to demotivate the younger members of the family when they've got fresh ideas. So, who are your family business leaders? And I think what this leads to is that it's my belief that if the principal shareholders, the Wazees who started the business, the people who are currently in charge, if they don't set the scene for allowing for free, creating a democratic governance platform within their business, I suspect not only are you going down a dangerous path, but you're also losing value. And I go back to that point again, that if you take Cargill, okay, that's a big global business, but I know a number of businesses in East and Central Africa that we look after. The ones that are really successful are those that have sort of democratized the governance of their companies. Just because I'm the senior partner of Anjawala and Khanna doesn't mean that I know everything, right? And certainly I know for a fact that in our law firm, and we have about almost 20 partners now, we've ensured that we have a democratic platform in terms of ideas, in terms of thought leadership, in terms of points on how to grow the business. Yes, I accept that I may be more experienced, but that doesn't give me the answers to all the questions. What I've done there, having dealt with the first two items on the slide, I've just put some points out there which I think I'll just touch on, and I'll touch on some in the next slide when we deal with shareholders agreements in more detail. Dividend policy. So, again, a very important point. Is your belief, or is your view, or are you agreed that you want to maximize profit from the business and extract it, or do you want to ensure that all profits that have been generated are plowed back into the business? Therein lies a tension which you can immediately see, right? So if you have, sadly, one brother who's passed away, or a sister who's passed away, and her family is expecting, or his family is expecting dividend payments regularly to pay their bills, whereas the others want to plow the money back into the business, you're going to have a tension. Okay? So how do you deal with that important issue? Dispute resolution. Disputes are bound to happen within families. What is the mechanism to deal with it? And here what I would say is that obviously a court should be the last place you want to go, right? It really is the last place you want to go. But again, how do you deal with that? What are the mechanisms? And again, we guide families on things like that. Liquidity. Okay? This is a really big factor, I think, that people simply don't think through, okay, in terms of family businesses. I have often come across family businesses that we advise on, and you look at the balance sheet value, and people can feel very proud of themselves by saying, well, my company is valued at 100 million shillings, or 200 million, or 500, or whatever it is. The point is that if you have 5 shareholders, 5 brothers and sisters, and that's the value of your company, and you each own an equal share, I guarantee you that if you try and sell your share, you will not equalize your value, right? Because who would buy shares in a family company where there is no governance, there's no guarantee of payment, there's no control? So, the issue of liquidity and creating liquidity in the shares becomes very critical. And that goes back to my earlier comment about what is the family social contract. So if the aim of the family is to create a big liquidity pool, then agree that within 10 years, we'll IPO. Within 10 years, we're going to do a trade sale. Within 10 years, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Because if you don't, and one shareholder wants to exit, you will find it very difficult to get your value. Okay? Family members, employment and compensation. Again, a very, very hot topic. So I am the mzee of the business. Is it automatic that my son or daughter has a right to join the business? And what is the compensation for that person? Is it based on KPIs? Okay. Does that child of mine have to gain experience from somewhere else before they can join the business? Okay. If they are not as competent as my independent CFO, should they become the CFO? Okay. Big issues, right? And again, if your aim is to have a democratic governance system, to put your best foot forward, is it automatic that family members do get employed in the business? And how will that affect your growth? How will that affect your capacity to build value? Interference with family business by family members. Okay, I mean, we see this time and time again where there's no alignment. So sadly, for example, if there's a death in the family, and this is a very regular theme that we see. So if you have, say, 4 brothers who own the business, one brother sadly dies, and there's an understanding, in quotes, unwritten, on how the business should operate. I'm fairly confident in saying that the widow of the brother, okay, would not have the same mindset with the remaining three brothers. And it's not because, you know, the wife of the widow is a difficult person. The widow's aim now would be to look after wealth and preserve wealth for the benefit of herself and her children, which means that she'll be risk averse, right? Which means that she would not want the other three brothers to borrow heavily, whereas the three remaining brothers may have brilliant ideas on how to expand the business through borrowing, but therein will lie attention, okay? And if the borrowing cannot happen because the widow, as a new shareholder, decides to veto any borrowing, what would happen to the business? And this goes nicely into the issue of succession planning. What we're also finding is, other than just the issue of a shareholders agreement, what planning have you put in terms of next generation? Have you got wills in place? Has some thought been given as to how ownership will pass in the event of death? And interestingly as well, an issue that people tend to forget is incapacity, right? I could be an owner of a business and, God forbid, I suffer from cancer for 2 to 3 years and therefore cannot be engaged fully in the business. What happens to my shareholding? What happens to my compensation? Okay. Retaining family ownership. Again, this goes back, I think, to some of the core values and visions. Is it always going to be a family business? Or is it going to be democratic in the sense that you're going to have, for example, a employee share scheme to motivate your employees to join in? We as a law firm, when you know, our roots are very old. My father started this law firm in 1954, and I hope, you know, he's passed on, but I hope he'd be happy seeing what has happened with our law firm, in the sense that we've completely democratized it. We took the view very early is that meritocracy must prevail, and just having, say, the Anjawala brothers running this law firm was not the right thing to do. So we opened up ownership very, very early. Okay? I'm just sharing a personal theme with you, but again, you know, has the family in your family business thought through some of these points, and do you accept, or do you agree that to really grow, you need third-party participation as well, and not just from the family? Mona, could you change the slide, please? Thank you. So when we talk about a family shareholders agreement, this is really a legal instrument that the family would get, would sign up to. I will now delve in a bit more detail with some of the key points, but hopefully the context I've given you, you know, as I've been speaking, has led you to have an appreciation of why this might be important. Because if some of the things that I've mentioned to you resonate with you and make sense, then you might want to think that having an agreement is important. And obviously, like any legal agreement, it would be binding on the parties, and you know, having thought through what works for your business. So I've touched upon dividend policy, for example. So, you know, is there an agreed dividend policy? If the older member of the family wants to simply extract cash because he's getting older, and the younger one wants to keep on investing, what is your deal around that? Have a discussion. Okay, is it you know, that all your distributable profits should be extracted? Should it be 20%, 30%? Should you have a dividend policy? These are all matters for discussion, right? Bearing in mind the inherent tensions when you have joint ownership, depending on, you know, for example, age. I touched upon liquidity. Okay, this is a really, as I said, for me, it's a really big point, which I think people completely ignore to their peril. So how do you make sure that you can create liquidity, if that's what you want, by the way? Yeah? If the family social contract is no, if you're a family member, you're locked into this family business for the rest of your life, that's fine, if that's what the family want. But if the idea is to be able to liquidate and create a pot of cash for each family owner, then we need to discuss this topic. Okay, can shares be sold? If they can be sold, to whom? Can they be sold to a competitor? How is the price fixed? So on and so forth. Okay? And that goes into the next point about family preemption rights. So, is it automatic that a family member can sell their shares? In terms of pricing, how is the price fixed? And that comes to the issue of valuation that I've just covered down below. They're both sort of linked in many ways. So what we'll find, for example, is that many items, I'm sure some of you would know that many items of value are not necessarily on your balance sheet. Okay? So if you have built a very good, strong brand, you may not have had that brand on your balance sheet as goodwill, and it's not been valued. Okay, so if you do your normal standard valuation of the business, are you getting the right value for your shares? Because that goodwill item is not on the balance sheet as a balance sheet item. Okay, so these are again very, very hot topics because when it comes to valuation, it's a very expensive process, and it's also very, very subjective. It's not objective at all. If we've got any accountants and values of businesses, they will tell you that, right? That, is the multiple for this business 5, 6, 7 of EBITDA? Okay, what is it? Okay. We act for a lot of banks. When you look at the valuation of banks, 4 years ago, when things were very hot in Kenya, it was 2 times book. Today, you're lucky if you get book, right? So how do you value your business? And particularly in the context of liquidity and an exit, because that's again going to be a big dispute point, right? If you don't agree this, the effect of divorce, death, and incapacity. You have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and say a brother or sister, sadly, their marriage goes south. You know that those shares may be available to the other spouse in the event of a divorce. How do you cater for that? Knowing that you may suddenly have a very bitter spouse or ex-spouse basically becoming an owner. Is that something that is that a risk that you want to take? Same with death. Now in the case of death, of course, if there's a sister who owns shares and sadly she passes, and the husband becomes the owner by virtue of the wife's will or the sister's will, is that something that you actually want? Because what you'll find with a lot of family-owned businesses is that they're not that keen on sort of third-party family, if you see what I mean, joining. They don't see that as being a positive thing. How do you deal with that? Incapacity. I'm a partner in this firm. I work hard every day. I'm fairly confident that, God forbid, if I was incapacitated for 2 years and I was paid the same salary every month, some of other partners would definitely quarrel. And they would say, well, is it fair that somebody who's not working, okay, should be paid the same salary? It may be fine for a couple of months because out of respect or the fact that I'm a partner of many a standing, but ultimately this could become an issue. Plus, of course, control. So if I'm incapacitated as a shareholder, who represents my views on the board? Dispute resolution. So, if you don't cater for this in your shareholders agreement, obviously you are then guided by your articles of association of the company, and any dispute would go to court. And we know that our court systems in Kenya leave a lot to be desired in many respects. Is there an easier way to dispute resolution, to have a dispute resolution? So, for example, disputes might not be sort of bitter in the sense that there's something that's going to break up the company, but you have one shareholder who wants to borrow money, and another shareholder who thinks that borrowing is too risky, right? Now, if you don't have a mechanism to deal with that, of course, that dispute can fester and get out of hand. But if you have a sensible dispute resolution process in your shareholders agreement, where, for example, that dispute can go to an independent third party, who will then pass his comment on uh, on whether the borrowing should take place or should not take place, you found a very easy mechanism to deal with that dispute without going to court. I've just got a comment from a participant saying I didn't touch on valuation. So let me just touch on that. Yeah. So of course, you'll find that most articles, for example, will say that fair value of a company should apply in the case of valuation. And as I've said earlier, valuation is an art, it's not a science. It's completely subjective. So we would normally say that, let's agree some valuation principles. And that a valuation of a hotel, for example, is very different from a valuation of an IT company. When you do your valuation, do you accept it's a going concern valuation? Do you want to limit the value in some ways? So for example, what we've advised certain family members is that if the family social contract is that this is a long-term investment for the family, and another family member having signed up to that arrangement say within 5 or 7 years says, listen, I want to leave. Okay, I want to pack my bags and go with my wife and children and live in Canada. Okay, we might permit that, but we might say that, well, if that's the case, you've broken your original deal with us, in which case we will buy your shares at a deep discount. Okay, so if the value of your shares is 100 shillings, we'll buy those shares at 60 shillings per share. Okay? Because you're essentially broken the original deal. And that might be quite a good way of dealing with something like this, because what happens is that the remaining shareholders essentially buy at a discount, and the exiting shareholder can't complain because, of course, the original deal he signed up to is essentially breaching. And then what we've done in the past as well is that we all know that we can be asset rich but cash light. So if it's even if it's a 40% discount, you can say, well, we can pay the 60% over say 5 years. So it gives enough time for the family, the remaining family, to, if necessary, even raise finance to buy that shareholder out. Next generational rights to control and decision making. This is the point that I alluded to earlier, really. Is it the case automatically that the wazays of the business control? Do the younger generation come in and have decision making arrangements? Do we give them those rights? And this can be very controversial. I mean, I think if you all put your hand on your heart, you'll see what I mean if I explain a little bit more. So you have 4 brothers, or brothers and sisters. The oldest is say 65 and the youngest is say 35. And the 65-year-old brother says, my son and daughter are doing the business tomorrow, okay? And they start bossing around with the younger uncle, okay? You can see where I'm leading to, right? How do you deal with issues like that? Should they just simply initially be board observers, or should they have a direct board seat? If they have a board seat, do they have more voting rights than the younger members of the family? So these are all the different set of issues that we would sit with the family and talk about, and essentially try and create that family social contract. Okay, how do they view this business going forward, and how do they deal with all these different challenges? There is a family in Tanzania that we look after, and they currently have 123 shareholders. There are shareholders holding like 0.2%, and some hold shareholders 4%, 3%, 6%. And we've spent a lot of time with that family to put together arrangements for them to deal with exactly these sort of issues. And Mona will touch upon some of those matters in the family constitution when she turns to those. Independent board of directors. Clearly, we all know that in terms of governance, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have people who will be your sounding board, independent, not with family links. And clearly, there's something to be strongly recommended to enhance your board. And of course, if you get the right people, they may be able to generate more business for you. If there are people with good connections, they can help you with bank borrowing, with generating more business, with essentially bringing fresh ideas to your board. Board and shareholder meetings. we know that with family businesses, a lot of these meetings are basically held on the kitchen table, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with that, you know. If it's four brothers together getting at a brother's home for dinner and making decisions, as I said, nothing inherently wrong with that, but bring some formality to it. Yeah, are you taking board minutes down? Are you passing your resolutions properly? Are you recording stuff? You don't want to be in a position when you said, you remember 3 years ago you told me that this was fine. Yeah, have everything right in writing. And what we've frankly even seen is that, you know, as part of our practice, we act for a lot of private equity funds, right? Who are active in doing M&A deals in this market. And let me tell you that if you have dealt with some of this stuff, it will in fact impact on your valuation that the PE firm sees and give you a better valuation, because they'll see you as an organized business, a business that has thought through a lot of these very important themes in how they run themselves. Whereas if they come into your business and there are no board meetings, there are no board minutes, your board is messed up, they see that you haven't dealt with some of these key risks that I've identified. When they think about valuing and taking a stake in your business, these will all become key issues for them. And it will affect value. It'll also delay your deal, because they'll want to tidy all these issues up before they make their investment into a comprehensive investment agreement. Limits of authority. So can I, as the elder brother, simply go and sign a check and buy myself a new Land Cruiser from Toyota Kenya, right? Should there be some limits of authority, for example, on hiring and firing, on signing of checks, on binding the company to various things? Can I simply go and sack the CFO and bring a new CFO? So, and you can see that if you don't deal with some of these issues, even though I'm the elder in the family, and maybe somebody won't say anything, but I can guarantee you they'll be upset. And an upset shareholder or an upset key decision. And the last one I want to touch on is employment issues. And this is a mixture of various things. So it deals with what I talked about earlier in terms of employing family members in the business, but also what are your rules around employing senior executives? Is it just I make the decision? Is there a process where you go through with all the family members deciding on key roles, and what will be their terms? So let me stop there. I know I'm starting on over my time slot, but I'll hand over the baton to Mona, Joseph, if that's okay, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Thank you, Atik. It's a pleasure for us to be talking to you all today, so thank you very much. Atik touched upon shareholders' agreements. I will talk about family constitutions. So shareholders' agreements are agreements entered into by shareholders. What is a family constitution? It is when there are other family members that are part of the family business, but they're not necessarily shareholders of the business. So how do you bring their commitment to the business and their focus to the business? How do you align your vision? By having a family constitution, it's basically a written statement that would record the family's principles, outlining their commitment to the family's core values, vision, and mission of the business. It is a formal document which sets out rights, values, rules applying to the stakeholders in the family business, and it provides ways to deal with situations which may arise in the course of the family business's operation. It's to build a sustainable model that promotes generations of pro-growth decisions. It is not legally binding like a shareholders' agreement, but a family constitution is generally held together by the positive recognition and buy-in from all involved. So when would you create a family constitution? A family constitution can be entered into at any time throughout the life of the family business. However, it is advisable to enter into it, especially before any substantial changes in the business, so that the vision and goals of the family are aligned before embarking on any major changes. So to give an example, there are two brothers, John and James. They are the shareholders in the business. Their wives are also working for the family business. They have 3 children each. The children have 2 children each. So already we have 16 family members comprising of the 2 initial brothers, their wives, their children, the grandchildren. Some spouses may not want to work in the business. Some may be working. They're not all shareholders. They may wish to expand into other locations. Extended family may wish to join in. So this is where you need a family constitution to align the vision of the whole family. In this case, let's say they have a 3rd brother, Julius, who has passed on. Julius's son and family who lived overseas may now want to come to Kenya. Julius's son and recently graduated granddaughter may want to work in this business. So it would be important to have a common vision, focus, because there are different mindsets, different generations, different ways of thinking, different educational backgrounds. A family constitution would therefore give you a common vision, a common statement, where we all know that the 3rd generation is generally a pivotal one in the evolution of a business. Households are dispersed in various geographical locations. Each has different children, each has different income levels. So in this way, if you have a family constitution, you basically are aligning everyone's vision together. It can also serve as a motivational tool to help family members basically stay on one page, be informed of the goals of the business, set out the roles of the family members, and how to make plans for the future. Some family businesses have a common value that they want to do philanthropic activities. Nowadays, many companies have CSR programs in place. So this would bring the family closer around a shared value that they've identified, and they can ensure that they put in place for the business. Although family constitutions are generally not legally binding, they're said to be emotionally binding. Although non-compliance with its provisions may not result in any legal sanctions, there would be kind of emotional pressure on a family member to comply with the constitution, as they don't want to appear to be the bad one and depart from the family's vision and values. A constitution would be jointly created by the family owners through maybe workshops and with the help of an advisor who has experience in this. So by developing a family constitution, shareholders would work together to find answers to the following questions. Where do we come from as a family business? What is our history and tradition? Where are we now? Where do we want to go to? Do we wish to expand, set up new lines? What do we wish to do? What are our guiding principles? Do we want to have philanthropic objectives? What gives us competitive advantage? How do we make decisions surrounding succession, dividend policies, new investments? What governing bodies do we require? So there's a board of directors, but would we need any other body to guide us as a family, such as family managers or family council? Who will take on which tasks and for what period of time? You don't want one person to be just clinging on to power. How do you share power within the organization? So in a family constitution, you would set out your mission statement, and that is your driver of your overall family business strategy. Then you would consider to have in your constitution certain governance institutions. So for example, a family manager or a family council who would be responsible for organizing events, training, social engagements, help formulate family policies, and if needed, they would be the ones who you would turn to for conflict management. Family businesses may spread within a country or within East Africa and further jurisdictions. And the larger the circle of shareholders, the more frequently such family businesses fall back on a family council. I think mentioned this family in Tanzania, and they've done exactly that, to have a family council in place. So they would effectively, provide clarity on roles, rights, responsibilities of family members, encourage them to act responsibly toward the business and the family, regulate, appropriate family and owner inclusion in business discussions. They would organize annual retreats for the wider family members who are not involved in the business. This is what's called a family assembly, so that the family are all aware of what's going on in the business and have an opportunity to meet each other. The Constitution would also set out family policies on employment, succession, participation of family members. So for example, what are the employment standards? Can any family member, just because they're a family, is that the sole qualification? Or would you want them to be having a degree or some form of experience and merit to be able to join? It would be important, if you want to expand a business, for a person to have the right qualifications and not just join because they're simply a family member. That used to work maybe when you started, but if you wish to expand and become a professional outfit and meet the competition, then you would need to think of all these factors. So would you want to have like career development policies for family employees, send them for training so that they have the right skill set? How would you organize remuneration? Would everybody just be paid equally because they're a family member, or is it again based on their experience, qualification? Sometimes a family member thinks it's their birthright just to join the business, and effectively some may work very hard, another family member may not, but that would ultimately not be fair. So how is remuneration going to be decided? That would be an important thing to consider in a family constitution. Succession process. Can a patriarch, for example, just continue being in the family business and take all decisions? Would there be retirement ages that you would put into the family constitution? So these are important aspects to consider, because if you want a family business to continue for future generations, it would be important for everyone to have the common mindset as to how the family is going to be, how the family business is going to succeed going forward. And because some of these topics surrounding compensation, succession, career development, they're clearly business policy areas. A family manager or a family council would consult with the board, get the board's endorsement of the policy before it becomes an official policy of the company. The board and family council should effectively coordinate their work and not overstep each other's domains. So coordination may take, basically meeting the board and the council can meet each other regularly or have joint planning sessions, or a board member can sit on the council so that they're aware of what the council, what family policies have been formulated. How would you appoint these members on the family institutions, such as the family council? You would need to decide whether it's going to be based on percentage shareholding being held by a particular member, or is it going to be that each family unit wants to appoint one individual on the council? Is it going to be based on experience or seniority? If you have many younger age groups, would you want to create what's called a new generation council? Some of our larger family companies do have that, so that the younger age group feel included in making certain kinds of policy decisions in relation to the family. A family constitution can also provide informal and internal dispute resolutions to help minimize costs and avoid publicity. While having a constitution may not prevent conflict entirely, at least it provides guidance and mechanisms as to how conflict can be efficiently resolved. So it could be by way of mediation procedures, appointment of an impartial mediator to refer disputes to. So I've mentioned that a family constitution and a shareholders agreement, there are certain differences. So family constitution, as I mentioned, is not legally binding, but a shareholders agreement is legally binding. The signatories of a family constitution would be all the family members. So whoever enters into the business, they would sign up to this family constitution. whereas a shareholders agreement would be entered into by shareholders of the business. A family constitution basically is the driver of the family's policy, whereas the board and the shareholders agreement is more to do with the business policies. So in that way, the contents of a family constitution and shareholders agreement are different, and they can both be entered into. You can have a shareholders agreement and a family constitution. So turning to senior management, it is important for any business to consider how they want to grow long term. Just by bringing in family members who are not qualified, that may not work to drive the business and succeed and keep up with the competition. You need to attract the best outsiders with establishing good governance practices so that the family business can grow. A very recent survey in Kenya showed that about 25% businesses in Kenya have some form of succession plan in place for its CEO, and around 16% of companies have any form of succession plan in place for senior management. So if anything happened to the CEO or any senior management, most of the companies in Kenya have no plans in place. A key to successful business is to have a good management and people. Atik mentioned how our firm started. It started with our founding partner, and then Atik and his brother joined the firm. They basically grew the firm. One of their wives was the office manager. They had worked overseas and they had a vision. They wanted to grow the firm. Therefore, the lawyers that were there in the firm were promoted to partners. Over time, the firm has grown with God's grace. We have a COO, we have a CFO, we have a senior HR manager, and so on. So in that way, the firm expanded because it was recognized that to grow, you need to have other professionals that you need to bring in as well. Plus, you need to show the senior management that you value them and that it's not only going to be family decisions made at home, but you're going to bring them in to make to make key decisions and to drive the business forward. This is very important. In our firm, the core value is to maintain the family culture. So despite being of various backgrounds, we are still with one big family supporting each other with clever people driven to do well. So even in your businesses, it is important to bring in the right fit so that you maintain the core values of your organization. Your senior managers, they must feel that they have career progression. If decisions are made today in the office and then you go home and with your family, you change the decision, then the senior management will not feel valued and they will leave because they know they have no voice. In that sense, you will not be able to retain good professionals with you. In the same vein, policies need to be put in place to groom the next generation so that there is business continuity. So you need to have succession plans in place for your CEO and senior management. Sometimes you know well in advance, is someone going to retire? Is someone going to leave for any reason? You need to plan for that. Who will replace them? So think about the impact of a person who is valuable in your company. If they leave, what are you going to do? Have you got any plans in place? Have you pinpointed any succession candidates? Anyone who can step in those positions? If you are going to hire internally, which employees would you consider to be the candidates for the role? Have you met with your protege and singled them out and told them that, look, you have a good chance of promotion? Are you going to groom them, to take over to take over and to step up into their new promoted roles? Are you having trainings in place? Those are very important so that you can train your successors as well. So basically invest in professional development because that helps to ensure business continuity and have succession plans in place. And also think about your own successor. Who are you grooming to take over? That's very important. Is yours a family first company or a business first company? A family first and business first companies, they operate quite differently. Family first companies, they're concerned about the family. Their policies are all relating to the family only. In most first generation businesses, they all started off as family first companies. They emphasize the needs of the family over what is best and most productive for the business. Whereas business first companies have a clear set of boundaries between family issues and business and don't let them intertwine. The best interest of the business is a priority. So for example, in family first companies, anyone can join as long as they're a family. Whereas a business first company will see, is the family member qualified to take this particular task or role? They need to have training? Do they have the right degree? Have they worked in any other company to gain the right experience? Compensation. In family businesses, family first companies, generally you would say that most people would be paid equally. Whereas in business first companies, compensation is based on your performance. It's all performance related. Leadership. How is the leadership in family first companies? It's based on seniority, who has been there longest, who is the patriarch, who is the elder brother. They will be the leader. Leadership is key. You know, if you have a good leader, they can be the glue to the company. So that it's a very important decision to know who the right leader is. It shouldn't necessarily be on who is the eldest and who has been around the longest. In business first companies, leadership has to be earned. It is not just a right. In family first companies, you know, the company account is like your personal account, and you feel, you know, checks are just written for personal needs. It's like your company account is your family account. Whereas that is not the case in business first companies. You can't just use the business account for your personal needs. In family first companies, usually there are no formal training programs, whereas in business first companies, you know, there is training, people are, you know, vetted on their qualifications and groomed accordingly. So even if you started as a family first company, you need to think how you want to progress into a business first company if that is what you wish your strategy to be ultimately. I mentioned when I was discussing family constitutions that there are different types of family institutions that can drive the constitution of the family business. So one such forum is a family assembly. A family assembly meets annually, typically. Like the example Atik gave of our client in Tanzania, they have a family assembly. They meet at a resort every year, and maybe for 1 or 2 days they'll meet, they'll have fun together, but then there's a structure in place as to how their day is. They will have like training programs. They will have their managers maybe present as to where the company is at, what has happened throughout the year in the company, so that the whole family, even the ones that are not shareholders, and even those that are not working in the business itself, but so all the spouses as well, they all meet together and find out what's been going on with the company. This is especially relevant when you have a large company where you want your family to basically integrate and know each other well, and also you bring in your young children to the company, to the retreat as well, so that everybody gets to know each other, and there's a bonding, so to speak. It's a good forum, for everyone to get to learn what's happening, and get to meet each other on an informal basis. Another kind of family institution is a family council. So where you have, 15 or fewer adults, you may be able to have in-depth discussions at, the family assembly meeting. But when your family grows into a larger size, then it would benefit to have a family council. The family council can perform all these duties such as planning family assemblies, discussing family issues and direction, reach decisions and speak with one voice about its goals, liaise with the board of directors about family views on things, develop plans and policies, guard against family interference with the business, and so on and so forth. They can create educational events as well for family members. They can plan, events where the family gets to know about what's going on in the business. How do you compose a family council? It can be, as I mentioned earlier, one member elected per family branch. It should look as if the whole family is represented in the family council. So there should be maybe representation of all generations, genders, and so on, so that the views of the entire family are taken into account. Family councils usually meet a few times a year. And primarily their task is to strengthen the family relationship with this business and be a resource for bringing family policies to the board, so that the board also tries to align the policies of the business accordingly. A family council or assembly does not replace the board. It basically complements it. And as I mentioned, it is, the family council sets policy for the family, whereas the board takes it into account and sets policy for the direction of the business. So effectively, they're coordinating with each other. That is the roles of family institutions in the Constitution. And it is important to have these in place, especially when your family business is growing, so that everybody's views are taken into account. That comes to the end of our presentation. We would be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Atik and Mona, for your presentation. I think there's a lot of information that you've shared, and we are hoping that some of this information will be available to the attendees. We have recorded this Zoom call, and we hope that some of this information, your presentations, will be available for the attendees if you're agreeable to that. We learned quite a bit. I'm also from a family business, so it was quite challenging. We have a few questions from the participants as we close. Before I hand over to Antoinette, I'll just bring up one question that was brought up and a couple of questions that I have, and then we will close. The question that somebody asked, and I will try to understand the question because it's a bit complicated. How do you legally provide for shared resources in different family businesses that are not necessarily structured as holdings, affiliates, subsidiaries, etc., but have similar shareholders and the financial pool is shared? So how I understand that question is, what if one family has got multiple businesses with similar shareholding? The businesses are not affiliated to each other. They're not holding companies or subsidiaries, but you can see the resources to fund those businesses are shared, and that is a common thing. We start one business, we start another, and we pay little attention to the shareholding. Yes.
Okay, so I think let me answer that in two ways. One is that clearly some thought should be given to whether it is appropriate to create a holding company, because I think that's an important point to keep in mind. And what is interesting is that under our tax laws, for example, there's some very interesting exemptions for CGT and stamp duty to move shares to a family company. So actually, it might not even cost that much to do it in terms of capital gains tax and stamp duty, which would be the two main taxes that would apply in the event you move shares. And of course, what you've done suddenly is to create a structure where all the family businesses can be under control under one holding company, and all the things that we've discussed could be catered for there. What it also does, frankly, in terms of just think about it in terms of, for example, bank borrowing. You have a consolidated balance sheet now, which is going to be much more significant in value as compared to individual balance sheets that you're trying to borrow on. Okay? But having said that, and if that's not the way you want to go, then I think there are essentially two ways that you could do this. One is you could of course end up with individual shareholders agreements, or you could end up with an overarching agreement, which essentially would cater for all the businesses. It would be relatively complicated, depending on how many businesses, of course, that exist, because every business may be slightly different in terms of its nature. But you know, that's the way. If it was 3 businesses, you could say you would have just 3 separate shareholders agreements, which would apply to each business. Or you could end up with, as I said, an overarching agreement that would essentially say that we're shareholders in all these underlying, and these are the agreements that we've reached vis-a-vis each one. Keep in mind that a shareholders agreement basically is a contract between the shareholders. So like any other contract as well, it's dynamic. So if you agree something today, nothing stops you from changing it after 3 years because circumstances have changed. I mean, as long as there's sort of sensible, there's family unity and people are sensible, you can keep on upgrading the shareholders agreement to reflect new economic and business realities.
Thank you, Atik. I think you answered that question from one of our attendees. Mona, I like the fact that you brought up about family businesses should think more like business families. So we should not consider ourselves really as family business, but as business families. But a quick question. So should every business, regardless of its size, have a shareholders agreement?
It would be important, in my view, to have a shareholders agreement, because it would set out, it would set out things like, can someone sell their shares tomorrow? Do you want them to go by a certain, follow a certain procedure and offer those shares to the existing shareholders first? Because where it's a family business, you don't want just someone else to, one of the brothers to sell to an outsider. You may want to keep it within the family. So, things like if one of the family shareholders dies or goes through a divorce, how do you protect those shares? So it is important to have a shareholders agreement setting out all these things. Plus, if one of the shareholder dies, do you want the widow or the widower to step in and take over? They don't know anything about the business. Their risk would be totally different from the existing business-minded shareholders. So it is important to set it out as a family as to what you want to happen when these eventualities happen. And so today everything may be fine, but you need to think about the future.
If I can just add, Joe, I think the other important point there is that whether you end up with an agreement or not, the point is that you will have a very interesting discussion between the owners, and what we have found continuously with business owners is that these are very hard topics to talk about. Death of an owner, can your spouse join the business? The fact of the matter is that you might not even end up with an agreement, but the fact that you have this discussion in itself, I think, is very positive, because what it does is it brings out latent concerns that were underlying in the business. And the point is that if there are these concerns, it's going to affect productivity. And as I said earlier, it's going to affect value.
Those are very good points. So from my understanding, that shareholders agreements protect minority shareholders, as Mona pointed out. And Atik, I read an article in a Harvard Business Review once where there was a big debate as to whether family businesses should allow in-laws into the business. Now, it's funny that one would think about that, but it's a big issue that nobody really talks about. So I think that shareholders agreements then are relevant. I have one more question before I will hand over to Antoinette, and that's from somebody who asks, can two shareholders agree amongst themselves to sell and business? Can two of those shareholders agree amongst themselves, between themselves, and say, we're going to sell and buy shares? And what,
Yeah, so I'm assuming in this scenario, it's, they say 4 shareholders, but 2 shareholders want to enter into a separate deal.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the answer probably would be no. And the reason that is that you'll be bound initially by your articles of association, right? So the shareholders agreement, unless all the 4 shareholders agreement, because your initial starting point from a legal perspective is your articles of association. So if there are 4 shareholders, that will bind. The 2 shareholders can't opt out of the articles unless all 4 agree to opt out of the articles.
Okay, fine. The last question, and the absolute last one, is somebody says, comment on a scenario where shareholders are also on the board. I think the presumption here is that, I don't know if the question is whether can shareholders join the board, or a scenario where some are on and some are not. Yes.
The answer is yes, absolutely they can. But clearly, this is what the point you were raised earlier, Joseph, is that, you know, if I'm holding 1% of a company, should I get a board seat? Right now, you know, it could be that your articles say that you do, and if you think about it, you may end up with disproportionate power compared to the people who own the 99%. So these are exactly the type of topics that, you know, would need to be thought through, and exactly why tensions will arise. Because you can see in the situation there where if I'm a 1% shareholder, I have a board seat, clearly I'm disproportionately much more powerful than somebody who owns the rest of the 99%, for example, or if 2 people own the rest of the shares. So these are issues that one needs to get to the bottom of and then document it in a way that makes sense.
Well, thank you very much for that, Atik and Mona. I think my takeaway from this, amongst many things, is that when we start a company, we should take it very seriously. I think we should consider the articles seriously. We should think about the shareholders agreement seriously, even in our own family businesses. And we should introduce tools such as family constitutions, because I don't think we give them that much thought. I think we just want to get it registered and go about our business and only tackle these issues when they come to a head. And sometimes it's too late or can be a very painful process. So I want to thank you both very much for your time, and I want to thank the attendees. And I'll hand it over to Antoinette to close. You will not hear from me again, so thank you all for participating.
Thank you as well, Joseph, but thank you, Atik, thank you, Mona, thank you all the participants for attending the webinar. And if you'd like more information about AFB, you can log on to our website. I have put it there. Those who would like to get more information or get in touch with Atik or Mona, they are associate members of the Association of Family Business Enterprises, so you can reach out to me directly and I'll be glad to share their contacts. So on behalf of everybody at AFB, I'd just like to say thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all. Very nice to be part of today's event.
Thank you.
Goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.